Boxing's biggest names, boxing's biggest stories, boxing's biggest fights, boxing's greatest memories and moments. Folks, you're looking at a shot from our very first episode, which aired October the 14th, 2020 on Fight. There's Lee Groves, Amber Renee Dixon, show mascot Charlie Burley, and yours truly. I can't believe it's been over 3 years as we come to you with a live shot of what is now season 3, episode number 34, which means, I guess if you calculate all of that, it's show number 100, if my math is correct, Mr. Groves. Show 100. And again, boxing's biggest names, boxing's biggest stories, biggest fights, greatest memories and moments. We cover it all, and we're going to look back at it all, at least not every moment of the 99 episodes, but as much as we can and as much as we feel will really illustrate what the show is all about. And I now welcome boxing writer, author, CompuBox counter, historian, editor. He's a lot of things these days. Lee Groves, how you doing, Lee?
Doing well, Smitty. And, we were talking about the genesis of the show, and you said that you weren't even sure that you were even going to do this.
Yeah. It and by the way, folks, you saw that early shot. We will try to assemble the gang, the original gang, later on in the program. Amber Renee Dixon scheduled to be with us later on. Of course, she has Nevada Week on PBS that she's shooting an episode today. Charlie Burley is around, but not in the shot. We'll get to that. But it was Amber, Lee, that I know we were at the dog park with, we had Charlie, and we were discussing a few different items. And she said, you've done everything else in your career. You've done radio, you've done television, you've done boxing as a commentator, play-by-play or blow-by-blow and color. You've done, but you haven't done this podcast thing. And I asked her to define what the hell is a podcast, and she really couldn't. I asked you, you couldn't. But here we go. I just went back to basics, Lee, and what I do know is hosting a radio show or a television show. So I just put the hosting hat back on. And one of the things I really wanted to do, because my television show, which is still on the air, getting ready to head into the 20th year, if we make it till the first of the year, it is called, of course, In This Corner. And I wanted this show to be called In This Corner, especially since now I have the trademark In This Corner. And it all started for me, though, really, with this book. And I know you're very familiar with this book from Peter Heller. What year did it come out? In the early 70s, right?
It was 1972. In fact, when we had Peter Heller on the show, it was the 50th anniversary of the release of the book.
Yeah, and if he had done another book, or there had been any other In This Corners, I probably would have never even. I don't even know if I would have done my television show the way that I ended up doing it, with the interview in the in-ring. But it was great that we caught up with Heller, and you've prepared all of these clips. So I'll let you lead the folks into this first one.
Right, you pretty much explained it, hit it right on the head. You said in this following clip that you probably wouldn't have done a TV show of the same name if he had released a second book or a third book, but you might have done a facsimile of it, maybe the in-ring segment. But once you got into TV, the idea of the format kind of came to fruition. And in the end, In This Corner, the book, served as the cornerstone for In This Corner, the TV show, and now In This Corner, the podcast. As you will see in this clip from season 2, episode 1. Let's play the clip.
And I got to say, on a personal note, had he come out with a second or a third edition, I I probably would not have done my show in this corner. I might have done a facsimile of it with maybe just the in-rings, but it was that book and reading that book so many times, that made me think. And, once I got into television, that, wow, how about, and I remember my producer saying, an interview segment with old time fighters or fighters, whatever, it won't work. And I said, well, what about if we add an in-ring segment to it? And nah, people won't be interested. Well, In This Corner debuted April the 1st, 2004. And we were just on last week again. So there's never been a week in like 18 years that we haven't been on the air. But I really say it was because of Peter, your book, In This Corner, that prompted me to do the television show. Peter Heller, we caught up with him, and I'm smiling because it's kind of an interesting story about catching up with him. We had to sort of put on our investigative caps because there were reports, and I had seen and heard more than one, that Peter Heller was no longer in existence. But the report of Mr. Heller's demise, they were greatly exaggerated, weren't they?
They really were. We had read that Peter Heller had passed away. And since that would have been pretty big news, considering the historic value of his book In This Corner, we searched for an obituary or maybe a tribute piece online, and we couldn't find any. So that prompted us to find out for ourselves. Smitty contacted his sources. I contacted my sources. And we eventually found out that Heller not only was alive and well, he was certainly well enough to do our show. And in fact, he was the first guest of season 2. And it turned out to be a pretty terrific interview.
Yep. In his book, the In This Corner, so many big names, so many of the biggest names in the history of boxing when that book came out. And that's something we prided ourselves in. And I'll just let you take it away with as we start to look into our first thing is boxing's biggest names. And Lord have mercy, we certainly did a lot of that.
We have. During the course of this series, we've interviewed 28 fighters, and with Gabriela Fundora winning the IBF flyweight title last week, we now have interviewed 25 widely recognized world champions. The total also includes 7 Hall of Famers. They include 2-division world champion Tim Bradley, 2-time heavyweight king George Foreman, 4-division titleist Roy Jones Jr., 3-division champion James Toney. And then we had 3 female inductees in Christy Martin, Holly Holm, and Regina Halmich. We also talked with a future Hall of Famer, Nonito Donaire, who did a little singing when he appeared on our show. We also talked with a former 168-pound champion in Caleb Plant. And we talked with current champions like Devin Haney and Regis Prograis, a real friend of our show. We had a unified 105-pound champion, Sinisa Estrada, and Smitty's favorite, pound-for-pound king, Terrence Bud Crawford. Now, speaking of Bud, who appeared in Season 1, Episode 31, Smitty interviewed him before Crawford's showdown with Sean Porter. And during that interview, Smitty might have experienced 2 of the best seconds of his boxing life when Crawford said this. Play the clip.
My number 1 pound-for-pound fighter for 4 to 5 years now. I have you over guys like Canelo and Inoue and Usyk and anybody and everybody. I have you number 1. Why am I right that you're the best fighter on the planet right now?
Because you know boxing.
Another fighter who's been on the show before, and we're going to have him on again in the very near future, is 168-pound champion David Benavidez. I know you prepared a couple of clips with David.
Yeah, he appeared on Season 1, Episode 11, and he did so with his advisor, Samson Lukowitz. Now, at the time, Benavidez was preparing for his March 2021 fight with Ronald Ellis, but it didn't take long for David to mention Caleb Plant's name. And in this first clip, Benavidez details the genesis of that bad blood that was between them. And he also threatened to administer a worse beating on Plant than Canelo would. So let's look at what he said.
Amber and I were looking at something the other day. I think she showed me a video of something that happened, an interaction with Caleb Plant. Is there bad blood with you and Caleb?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think sometimes in sports, especially with a combat sport like this, you know, you meet two people meet, which they don't like each other's ego or the person or however they are, and then things just seem to happen. You know, that day that you're talking about, I was in the gym, you know, and it wasn't even about me. It was Caleb Plant was just he's a big talker. You know what I mean? The type of person he is, well, around us in boxing, he's a person that, he acts like he's your friend in person, but then as you leave, you're like, oh yeah, that guy's nothing, this and that. So my brother confronted him about it. They were having a conversation, and then he sucker punched my brother and then went behind his trainer. And then, whatever happened, whatever that you guys seen in the video happened, but I feel like there is definitely bad blood in that fight. And I mean, between me and him, and even if he takes a loss with Canelo, it's not going to stop me from pursuing that fight. Canelo's not going to put a beating on worse than I am. And that's all I'm going to say about that. He doesn't like me, I don't like him. And that's why the fight is even more interesting, because it's genuine hate towards each other, So I feel like when you got something going on like that, that's just a recipe for an amazing fight.
Well, I guess Benavidez wasn't done talking about sweet hands, was he?
No, he wasn't. In fact, later on in the interview, he describes why it would have been better for Plant to have fought him sometime in 2021 than when they actually did fight in 2023, when they actually fought. So let's hear the reasons why David felt this way.
I feel like when I fight Caleb Plant, yes, he's a good boxer and he moves around really good, but I feel like I have the power to stop him. And I feel like I will stop him once I get that opportunity.
Do you think that opportunity, do you expect that opportunity? Do you want that opportunity to be in 2021?
I hope so. I hope it happens. But at the end of the day, I just turned 24. So time is on my side. It's not on their side. I think Caleb Plant's almost 28 or 29. So, I'm just getting more experience. I haven't even hit my man strength yet. I'm not even in my prime. So I'm getting stronger. I'm getting better. I'm getting faster. And my experience is growing as time goes by. So if they don't get me now, it's gonna end up worse for them in the future. So, so if they have a better chance of, actually having a good fight with me, it's now than later.
Well, Benavidez, I guess, made a believer out of Caleb Plant, right?
He did. It turns out that Benavidez was correct on almost all counts. He did inflict a worse beating on Plant than Canelo did. And while he tried his best to score the KO, especially in round 10, Plant managed to last until the final bell. And ironically, the two men apparently worked out the hate that they had built up before the fight. They worked it out in the ring, and they left it with a level of mutual respect.
And we got to give credit to Caleb Plant, the fact that just, in a not so long of a duration, he fought, both Canelo and Benavidez. So we got to give him credit for that, at least,
Oh, absolutely. Caleb Plant tried his best. He showed a toughness that it's just incredible.
Talk about some of the other fighters, too.
Yeah, other fighters we've had on include Wayne McCullough and Mickey Ward. We had them for 2 St. Patrick's Day specials. We also spoke with Layla McCarter, whose name has reemerged in the news in light of tonight's fight between Amanda Serrano and Danila Ramos. Well, why is that? Because Layla McCarter took part in the first 12-round, 3-minute per round fight in the WBA, BC, IBF, WBO umbrella back in 2007. And now Serrano is fighting the second, or the third, actually. The second. Anyway, we also talked with the brother and sister tandem of Sebastian and Gabriela Fundura. And we also spoke with several former world champions who now serve as broadcasters. They include Abner Maris, Sean Porter, Sergio Mora, Tim Bradley, and Raul Marquez.
Yeah, you know what? And something else we did is we don't forget the guys from the past. 2 of the shows I really enjoyed, and I think they were in season 3, I believe. Jesse James Leja, the pride of San Antonio, and the Tua man, David Tua.
Yeah, 2 really great guys. And very powerful puncher in David Tua, very classy boxer puncher in Jesse James Leha, and they're even better men than they were fighters. So,
and both doing well with Life LAB. I call it Life After Boxing.
awesome.
But when it comes to big names, we didn't stop with just the fighters.
No. And speaking of broadcasters, we talked about fighters who became broadcasters. We've spoken with 10 broadcasters who weren't fighters. And of those, 4 are enshrined in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Steve Farhood is one. Barry Tompkins is another. Jim Lampley is the third. And Tim Ryan is the fourth. Now, a fifth could come in the form of John Rawling, because he is appearing on the Hall of Fame ballot for the first time this year in the Observers category. And we've also had other broadcasters of note, like ESPN's Joe Tessitore, veteran broadcaster Rich Marotta, Randy Gordon, Doug Fisher, former editor of Ring Magazine, who's done plenty of ringside work himself, and Christina Poncher of ESPN, all of whom may someday appear on the Hall of Fame ballot.
And I remember a really nice show. We did a fun show with Sean O'Grady, the champ,
Yes.
was on with us, I think a few years ago. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And in addition to broadcasters, we've had boxing people from all walks of life. We've had referees and trainers, writers, managers, promoters, administrators, TV executives. We had a Hall of Fame ringside physician in Dr. Margaret Goodman. We had the head honcho of CompuBox, my boss, Bob Canobio. We had a matchmaker turned manager in Jolene Mazzone. We had a Hall of Fame ring announcer in Jimmy Lennon Jr. And we also had the man who runs the Hall of Fame in Ed Brophy. So finally, the show has also occasionally gone beyond the world of boxing. We spoke with the director, George Tillman Jr., who did the recent George Foreman biopic. And a few weeks ago, we spent nearly a full hour with WWE Hall of Famer Diamond Dallas Page, who happens to be a close friend of Smitty. The best part, I believe, is that if you want to see any of these shows, they're available free on demand on Fight.tv's website. All you got to do is go to the search bar, type In This Corner, and click on the episode that you want to see.
Yeah, and on that, when the George Foreman movie came out, George was part of that show. Big George Foreman was part of that show as well. And you don't see George doing much these days. Damn it, he was one of the ones that escaped me on the television show In This Corner. He had agreed to do it, even in ring, but he said I'd have to go to Houston to get it done. So if in fact I do any more episodes, which I have no idea if I'm going to do of that television show, he would actually, now that Marvelous Marvin Hagler's no longer with us, that would be the one I would look to do with Big George Foreman. So what else? Well, I guess that'll lead us into the biggest stories in boxing when we come back from the break, and we've covered it, and we cover it gavel to gavel. We don't pull any punches or mince any words. We look at the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to the biggest stories in boxing, and we'll look at some of those. Show number 100 In This Corner of the podcast with Charlie barking in the background. We'll be back.
I got 2 options. Option 1, I can accept defeat. Option 2, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back on In This Corner, the podcast, season 3, episode 34, show 100. Boxing's biggest names. We looked at a lot of those, and now we go to boxing's biggest stories. And there were a bunch, and we tried to cover them all.
As you said in the last segment, one of the biggest themes during the course of this series is discussing the good, the bad, and the ugly of boxing. And not only do we talk about the problems, we also try our best to come up with solutions. And one of our most memorable shows took place on season 3, episode 3, when we tried to interview Hall of Fame promoter Lou DiBella.
Loquacious Lou.
He really was. And what actually took place was 60 minutes of Lou DiBella Unplugged. And in fact, that's how we advertised the show. Now, in this clip, Smitty asked DiBella what he would do if he were suddenly named the czar of boxing. And while he did offer some suggestions, he also provided what I think is the most sweeping summation of the state of the sport that we have heard. Let's roll the clip and see what he said.
What are a few ways, if you were the czar of pugilism, what would be a few steps to possibly do that, given this time that we live in right now?
First of all, this would be 18-hour conversation. but you said something very, very important. You said if you were the czar of boxing, there would literally need to be a commissioner of boxing, a czar of boxing. One fucking person, one entity, one being, one body, really entrusted with the future of the sport as a business and as a sport. We don't have that commissioner. We don't have that czar. We never will. And everyone that's tried to be that has tried to do it out of greed and avarice. Eddie Hearn didn't exactly make it in the United States. You know, we're going to roll up boxing. I'm going to be the UFC. No, you're not. And no one's been able to do that. Not Bob Arum, not Eddie Hearn, not Lou DiBella, not Oscar De La Hoya. You know, we are the wild, wild west. We need to police ourselves. We need to manage ourselves. We need to make changes. Our health and safety regulations are barbaric. The inadequacy and politicization and corruption of our judging system is horrendous and has been since I got into the sport. Hasn't improved one fucking iota. There are literally, you know, not all ratings organizations are created equal. Some I personally prefer greatly to others, but there's one of them that's literally in my mind a criminal organization, and all of them are co-optable, and all of them are corruptible. And even if there's nothing illegal going on, and with respect to most of the people in ratings organizations, there is not illegality going on, but there is a broken system that encourages bias, encourages A-side dominance, encourages judging that's purposefully incorrect, encourages a blind eye to health and safety, and encourages our sport to continue weakening itself.
Well, Smitty and I have asked this question of many of our guests, and they pretty much said the same thing. They think that there should be one overarching entity with one set of ratings and one world champion in every weight class. But we also agree that this won't happen unless the following 4 men change their mind about maintaining their personal power. And they include WBC President Mauricio Suleiman, WBA President Gilberto Mendoza Jr., IBF President Daryl Peoples, and WBO President Francisco Paco Valcarcel. Now, they have gathered together from time to time, but unfortunately not for the reasons everybody wanted. Now, as DiBella said in the last clip, another major problem with the sport is the medical side, specifically drug testing. We interviewed 2 key figures in this particular arena: Hall of Fame ring physician Dr. Margaret Goodman, the president and board chairman of the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, known as VADA, and Victor Conti, the founder of the now-defunct Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative, known as BALCO, and the current founder of SNAC. Dr. Goodman appeared in season 1, episode 22, and here Smitty asked her a question about the testing procedures in the U.S. Let's see how Smitty asked the question, and let's hear how she answered it.
So many fights that I'm involved in, different places. I won't name the places, won't name the states or but I don't even know if there's testing at all, urine testing or anything. So just to keep it in the United States, what percentage of fight cards are fighters even tested for anything?
Um, it depends on the commission. Nevada is pretty aggressive. California is very aggressive. Um, Otherwise it can be just for championship events. And the other thing is that they may, you can say, well, if somebody's being, they always say, I've been drug tested. Well, what were you drug tested for? What's the panel, I mean, that you were tested for? Some are these quick tests that take a few minutes, that are mainly for stimulants and narcotics. Some are much more involved, like the type of testing that we do. But it's probably not as stringent as what we do. But it just depends. And I agree with you. I mean, I think it hasn't changed very much, and more often than not, there's none.
Morgan Freeman had the great line in $1 Million Baby that everything in boxing is backwards, and unfortunately, many things still are. Lee, it wasn't that many episodes later that I asked Conti, I think, something similar to what I asked Goodman, right?
Very much so. It was only 5 episodes later. And he ended up agreeing with Goodman's take that the current protocols don't even scratch the surface of what is needed and what would be considered effective. Here's what he said.
What I've always wondered, and I call fights all over the world. And I often wondered when these fighters are coming out to the ring, even for the fights I did last week in California, what percentage of boxers are tested for anything on just club shows but televised shows, but not world champion. I mean, what percentage of fighters, Victor, are even being tested for any damn thing?
There obviously needs to be much more. I don't think anybody is going to dispute that. And it needs to be 24/7, 365, and that's what I've been pushing for from day number one. And there are some, I believe that Canelo's now doing 24/7, 365. And, she's right about the fact that all the UFC fighters, now that's not all MMA fighters, because you have other organizations as well, but they have the lion's share of these fighters. So you've got, the front door, the back door, and the side door. And what I'm saying is the back door is wide open. Now, do I believe that the best program that would be likely, the VADA program with 24/7, 365 would be better than USADA. But your argument about, well, they've captured them, they have to do what they do, so they have a door open, they get to use all the stimulants they like, where VADA doesn't do that. But if you notice the name, it's voluntary as opposed to what the UFC is doing. And I'll go back to this issue of, I don't know this, but I'd be willing to bet that Margaret does this for the health and safety of the athletes, and she's not making a $500,000, $600,000 salary like Nowitzki is and like Tygart is.
Hey, I mentioned loquacious Lou DiBella. Victor had a lot to say. Vivacious Victor had a lot to say, and he didn't really pull any punches. He's had a rather nefarious past, infamous past with Balco. But what I really dug was you asked him a pretty tough question, and he answered it. Take a look at this.
When you created Snack more than a decade ago, I'm sure that you've had clients be involved in very high stakes fights. Have you ever been tempted to go back to the bad old days to give your clients that edge, to guarantee that they would emerge victorious in those big fights?
No.
And why? How do you handle it, and what's your story there?
Have there been people that have come and approached me and asked me to do that? There have. They come initially and they hint around and they talk in general terms, and I had one, I don't want to say the name, but a world champion boxer who called me up and said, listen, I have this guy that wants to come and talk to you. He's my good friend. He was in my wedding, et cetera, et cetera. And then he came with a couple other guys and we went to lunch. And then he came back and told the other guys to get out of the car. And then he said, well, now I'm going to tell you why I'm really here. I want you to give my fighter drugs. And we know you know how to do it, et cetera, et cetera. And we're willing to pay you a lot of money. I said, you've got the wrong guy. I cannot help you. And of course, I called his head trainer at the time and told him, listen, I can't have anything to do with this guy ever again because he's looking to go down the dark side. And I wouldn't do it mainly for my family, but another reason is I have built an institution. I have created a product that has sold over $300 million. More than $50 million has come to me personally. So I'm not going to lose that business or that reputation. I've got too much to lose now.
One of the things that we don't shy away from on In This Corner is the damage that these fighters face and deal with. We talk about the book In This Corner, and in that book, I remember Peter Heller, spoke about so many that he interviewed that just were shells of the ones that they were back when we were watching them fight. And somebody that I think's done a great job of looking deeply into this, digging deeply, is Tris Dixon, right?
Yeah, Tris Dixon wrote a book called Damage, and it has been hailed as one of the most important boxing books ever written for its unflinching honesty. He didn't do it from a standpoint of abolition. He wanted to bring out the conversation so that improvements can be made to the sport, and hopefully he will succeed. But we've spoken to referees like Jack Reese and Mark Nelson and Harvey Dock about their philosophies regarding ring safety. And we've also addressed safety issues with the trainers that we've had on the show. This show has a really deep history of addressing the hard realities of boxing. And it's a history that I think we should be very proud.
Yeah, I call us sometimes tongue-in-cheek, absolutely, unequivocally, the best pound-for-pound boxing show, or, I constantly, and in some ways, we are by default, because simply nobody else addresses these. They're too busy worried about clicks and hits and putting on a fighter here or a fighter there, or getting into a conversation about a stare down or some kind of contrived controversy. This is a sport. It's one that at one time, boxing and horse racing, thoroughbred racing, and maybe baseball were the biggest sports in the United States of America. And it needs to be looked at as a sport, not just, a fight or a bout or matching two guys or all of that. I mean, all of the things that we speak to, the safety and welfare of the fighters, how fights, are judged, how fights are scored, how fights are officiated. Even I remember we had Mark Ratner on, and the former executive director of the Nevada State Athletic Commission, and he's been really one of the key elements as to why the UFC has thrived the way they have, is that acquisition. We lost him, boxing lost him to some degree, and UFC got him, and the results are obvious. But I think that we've really done and we will continue to do that, where we don't shy away from anything. And with some of the things I think that we're going to talk about when Amber joins us as to what's going on now in boxing and looking ahead, I think more so than ever, we're going to have to think of solutions, because certainly boxing has its problems. One of the things that makes the sport so great, and when it's at its best, it is the best, are the great fights. And we did have some excellent fights. And when we come back from the break, we'll talk about how we pulled together and we added some components to break down fights, I think, as deeply as anybody. And when we come back, we'll talk and look into some of those in this corner of the podcast. I can't believe show 100. We'll be back.
I got two options. Option one, I can accept defeat. Option two, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back in this corner, the podcast, show 100. He's Lee Groves. I'm Smitty, or at least I used to be. Now, one of the things we've done on a regular basis is we do reviews and previews, and we break down fights, especially you, with all the research you do with the rest of your career. Nobody really covers as many fights or breaks down as many as you do. But then there are what we like to call on this program, the mega fights. And when there was a mega fight and when there is a mega fight, we add a few layers, don't we?
We do. And, we've covered most of the big fights that have occurred over the past 3 years. In fact, our first show was devoted entirely on previewing Vasily Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez. And since then, we have broken down and previewed dozens, if not hundreds of fights in our preview section. But in season 3, we decided to do something different for the big fights. We introduced a panel of experts that tackled the fights from multiple angles. Now, Smitty, you examined the fights from the angle of a former boxer turned veteran broadcaster who, according to Hall of Famer Burt Randolph Sugar, has, quote, the best eyes, unquote, in boxing. While I analyzed the bouts from the perspective of a historian and a CompuBox counter. But what makes these panel shows even more special are the opinions offered by Tom Yankello, who is a trainer known for his meticulous attention to detail, especially when it comes to styles and technique. Jolene Mazzone, who looked at the intangibles through the eyes of a matchmaker, and current current 140-pound champion Regis Prograis, who told us about the fights from a fighter's perspective, at least one from the current era, and Amber Renee Dixon, who not only was an Emmy-winning sports reporter, but also an expert on betting. Now, the following clips offer examples of what we mean when we say that we delve deeply into the nuts and bolts of a fight. Now, this first clip is from our breakdown of Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia, in which Tommy explains how Tank sets traps for his opponents. Let's roll the clip. Well, one of the things that Tank does really well is set traps. Can you briefly explain what that means?
Well, I think he'll put his head in certain positions to take it away from you, and he's so quick that you think he's there to be hit. He'll give it to you and take it away from you. And he utilizes his ring IQ to do that, and his anticipation. He has great anticipation, and then of course he has the great speed to be able to do those things. So he'll set traps and put himself in positions for shots that he might think that you're going to try to throw, and the shots that maybe you like. He could set a trap with the left hook for Ryan. And maybe come back with his own hook, or slip it and come back with a right hand, or like what he did. With Rolly, he knew Rolly was trying to throw that big looping shot, and then he just was able to, keep that focus and just make him miss by an inch and come right over the top of it. So he has great anticipation. So, what he does by traps is he'll give you little baits. He'll put a little bit weight on his front leg, but he's very strong. He's got great balance. So he's able to put his head in certain spots to bait you, so he can take it away from you and land the shot.
I love Tommy Yankello. Of course, he has the world-class boxing channel on YouTube. Man, he does a phenomenal job of breaking down these fights. But we had to have a fighter on as well, right?
We did, and that fighter was Regis Prograis. He's been a member of every panel so far, and that in turn has made him the most frequent guest on this show. He has made 9 appearances, and he'll be on for at least a 10th before his December 9th showdown with Devin Haney.
Well, wait a minute. Now, he can't break that fight down, can he?
No, well,
maybe
he can, but
I think we know who he's going to pick in that one.
I think so. He's made that very public and very obvious in recent days, and I don't think there's any reason why he's going to change his mind. But as for Amber, her betting expertise goes far beyond just reciting the odds and the over-unders and the various prop bets. And the proof of that is in this following clip from our preview of Canelo Alvarez versus Jermell Charlo. And there she explains how the betting houses have factored in Canelo's perceived erosion into their calculations. So let's listen to her explanation. do these numbers surprise you?
You know, they don't. And what I do think that they show is that the odds makers are recognizing that Canelo is slowing down, that he's not quite the force that he once was. And it's probably in their best interest to not make him as big of a favorite as they have in the past. And so I brought up DraftKings. They have Canelo as a minus 400 in this fight. Against John Ryder, they had Canelo a minus 1,600 favorite. And then against Triple G in their trilogy fight, a minus 500 favorite. So it shows they don't quite have as much confidence in Canelo as they once did. And then for the over-under on total rounds, that makes sense that the juice would be to the over, because the past 3 fights of Canelo have all gone the distance. Even when I think he's been trying to knock someone out, like John Ryder, he wanted to get a knockout in front of his hometown fans, came close to it, but just couldn't get over that hump. So this going the distance makes sense.
And Amber Renee will join us a little bit later on, the last segment of this program. We all did pretty damn good with our picks, but somebody was undefeated, I think.
And it's not a surprise that that person was Tom Yankello. He's the only one to have picked every fight correctly. And, you know, given his knowledge, that's not a big surprise. And going forward, we will continue to provide what we think and what everybody else should think is the deepest and most detailed breakdowns of boxing's biggest fights.
Yeah, the remainder of the year, what we've got Benavidez and Boo Boo.
Yep.
Andrade, and then of course we have Haney
Regis.
and Regis, and this talk of Fury and Usyk meeting before the end of the year. I guess it's possible, but I don't think it's probable. So we'll be breaking a few more down, and of course, as always, we'll have our reviews and previews of the let's call them the normal fights that are out there. But yeah, I love it when we get together and break down the biggies, no doubt about it. One of the other things that I've really enjoyed is when we do boxing's greatest memories and moments, and we'll talk about how that started and run a few clips from that in this corner of the podcast. We'll be back. Back in this corner of the podcast, season 3, episode 34 on Fight. And this is show 100. And I don't know exactly when we started it, but with your tremendous historical perspective on boxing, I know a little bit of my history as well. I wanted to really accentuate that and have a segment, and we call it Boxing's Greatest Memories and Moments.
Yeah, originally this was an occasional segment at the end of the show that, you know, marked a significant date in a fighter's life, birthday or something, or his career, or maybe the anniversary of a significant fight. But somewhere along the way, it became a full-blown segment designed to highlight my knowledge of history. And in this clip from season 3, episode 30, I tell the story of Rocky Marciano's historic one-punch knockout of Jersey Joe Walcott
Susie Q
in September 1952. Let's take a look. Well, on September 23rd, 1952, Rocky Marciano challenged Jersey Joe Walcott for the heavyweight championship at Philadelphia's Municipal Stadium. Now, in July, we relived Walcott's title-winning knockout against Ezzard Charles in 1951. And since then, Walcott closed out his 4-fight series with Charles with a 15-round unanimous decision. But now, Walcott was meeting Marciano, who came into the fight with a record of 42-0 with 37 knockouts, including an 8th-round TKO against Joe Louis the previous October, and a 2nd-round stoppage of top contender Harry Matthews less than 2 months before meeting Walcott. Although Walcott was the champion, it was Marciano who was the 9-5 betting favorite. Now, Walcott's usually a savvy stylist, but this time he came out of the corner fast and he dropped Marciano with a left hook in round one, moments after the bell sounded. It was the first time Rocky had been down in his career. He got up at the count of 4 and he continued to plow forward, but Walcott's skills allowed him to pile up the points. Both men were cut, and the Monsell solution used to treat Walcott's cut got into Marciano's eyes and blinded him. Showing terrific courage and an even better chin, Marciano continued to press forward despite being blinded, and he managed to land his share of power shots. Now, after 12 rounds, Walcott was ahead on all the scorecards, and if he won one of the next 3 rounds, he would retain his title on points. To that end, Walcott began the 13th backing toward the ropes, and he intended to land a right hand. Unfortunately for Walcott, Rocky was thinking the same thing. And even more unfortunately, Marciano started to throw his right hand a split second earlier. The punch traveled no more than 12 inches, but it landed with pulverizing force. A photograph taken by Herb Scharfman captured the moment of impact. And that Susie Q right hand not only produced the 10-count knockout and won Marciano the heavyweight championship, it would also mark the beginning of a new era.
And then there was March 8th, 1971, as I kind of glance up there. That picture was probably taken about a month and a half before what I consider to be not only the greatest boxing event in history. I think March 8th, 1971, Madison Square Garden, Ali Frazier was the biggest sporting event ever.
Agreed. It was very significant. And because the fight took place on 3/8/71, we decided to devote season 3, episode 8 to that fight. And, Smitty, you not only saw the fight live, you were inside the Fifth Street gym watching him train. And in this clip that's coming up, you explain how nervous you were going into fight night. Let's take a listen.
Scared to death. I was so into Muhammad Ali. I so idolized, the man that I remember being extremely nervous. I was not confident like you would have thought I should have been. I was just so nervous because I developed this kind of, like a love for him. And as it got closer and closer, there were certain things starting to happen. Watching every bit of coverage I could, I just felt like, why is Ali doing all of this? We've done all this promotion, or he's done all of this promotion. Why not, just kind of relax and get ready for the fight? In a sense, I thought maybe he was overdoing it. And, that was what I remember. And I don't remember much about the fight itself. And we'll get into that. But I do want to point this out to the fans, by the way. Not only was this scheduled for 15 rounds, folks, you know what kind of gloves they wore? 8-ounce gloves, which is completely amazing when you think about it. But to answer you, Lee, I just know I was a nervous wreck. A lot of what happened from the time my uncle picked me up to take me to the Miami Beach, I think we watched it at the convention center. I don't even remember. I just remember, boy, I know how I felt after the fight, though. Man, when I think about that entire part of my life, I sometimes I still get emotional. The fact that I was right there. I remember the last time I spoke to Muhammad before that fight was like 9 days before the fight. It was at the Fifth Street gym, and he was leaving, and he was even trying to set it up that I could even go to that fight. But there were reasons that I wasn't able to do it, and I ended up watching it on closed circuit TV. And it took me a lot of years to come to grips with that fight and what really happened in that fight because of my love for Muhammad Ali. But I would develop a tremendous love for Smokin' Joe Frazier. And as things would have it, I believe there are no coincidences, Lee, and you know this, I ended up doing the final interview with Joe Frazier on my television show In This Corner before he passed away. So to be a part of that in any way is just fantastic. And whenever I'm at the International Boxing Hall of Fame, you know, and in between my speeches and my lectures, when I go in there and they have, of course, the ring, you know, there, from that fight, I get chills. I still get chills when I see that ring where those two gladiators met. And I remember one of my favorite radio shows that I ever did when I was just a pup in radio. I think it might have been on the 10-year anniversary of that. I had Ali on my radio show, Frazier on my radio show, and Arthur McCanty on the show, the three men that were inside that ring that night, March 8th, 1971. Doesn't get any better than that. But you'll keep trying and I'll keep trying. There's lots more memories and moments that we'll cover when we come back. The final segment of In This Corner of the Podcast, Season 3, Episode 34, Show 100. The goal is to have the panel reassembled here. Amber, Renee, Charlie Burley. There might be some surprises, and since we've been looking back, let's look ahead to what we plan on the next 99 or 100. We'll do that after you see this. We'll be back.
I got two options. Option one, I can accept defeat. Option two, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back in this corner, the podcast, Show 100, final episode. We've reassembled the gang, most of it, and most of them, as we say hello to Amber Renee Dixon. She now, of course, is the host of Nevada Week on Vegas PBS. You know, when we first met, you were starting your career, not starting your career in broadcasting, but as a sports anchor on Channel 3 here in Las Vegas. And I told you you'd have your own show one day. I don't know if you believe me, but now you do. Take us through again how that all came to fruition.
Yeah, not my own show in sports, but in public affairs. I left news to get into sports to fulfill a kind of lifelong dream I had watching some of the sideline reporters growing up as a little girl. And then, fast forward, how many years? I'd say.
I think that was 2014 when, I believe,
COVID, and then 2021, some layoffs happened and I'm out. And that is amazing. That's after winning and being voted the best sports anchor in all of Nevada. You won an Emmy and Edward R. Murrow, and go figure. But that's the business we're in. Yeah. Yeah, it was 2017 I won that award. It sucked, right? You know, I mean, I really enjoyed sports, but the critique I've received, you know, post sports, or as I was laid off trying to get back into sports, was your delivery is a little bit too newsy. You're a little bit too serious. And I think that's always how I covered sports, is with harder questions and just a more realistic approach, as opposed to what you would say, Smitty, rah, rah, sis, boom, ba. I wasn't a cheerleader. I was more of a journalist, and that's not quite as popular these days. So maybe it's meant for me to be back in news, but it's public affairs, which is so different because it's very in-depth interviews with politicians, thought leaders, entertainers. It's different. It's fun though. I get to take my time.
I think at the end of the day, though, you know, you excel as a journalist in the preparation of it, your interviewing skills. So it's just a natural transition. I just think it's great. And think about like a Bryant Gumbel, how many different hats he's worn in broadcasting. Once you've done the anchoring and now the hosting, you could do it. I mean, whether it be about sports, politics, or tiddlywinks, it doesn't matter. you'd be able tiddlywinks. I don't know where that one came in, but I think you'd be able to handle it. So, and you're enjoying your work there at PBS.
I am enjoying it.
Well, there've been some other changes though too in your life.
Politics is right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of the reason I got out of news. It was at a North Las Vegas City Council meeting, and they voted to they were finally able to get out of the red and into, they weren't in a deficit anymore. They finally solved their budget issues, and I cried. I was so happy for them. And I thought, I don't know what I'm doing with myself right now. And that's why I went into sports.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the moment that kind of switched things. I wanted to do something different.
Well, the biggest and the most important change
biggest
in your
change
life
has been I've had a baby. Yes, Otto. And wow. How do you describe that? It's turned my world upside down. I have this tremendous love for him, and also tremendous exhaustion all the time. And
where did the name Otto come from? I think I know.
Okay. Dad is a Cleveland Browns fan. So Otto, the former quarterback, the great quarterback.
Otto Graham.
Of the Cleveland Browns. Me, I prefer Jim Otto from the Raiders, the great center who, pretty much lost his leg after playing so many years of football and has a prosthetic with a Raiders emblem on it. I just think he's really badass. So there's that. And he's German. Dad's German, very German. So Otto is kind of a German name.
Yeah, he is a cutie. I know we just showed a picture of him there. And speaking of that, you have your a birthday coming up. You are a Halloween child, which fits you apropos if those that know you off when you're not working. So what do you got planned?
Or your listeners even care about this stuff?
Yes, this is very exciting stuff.
Oh, so thrilling.
Yeah, but we won't give away your age, even though mine's all over Wikipedia. But anyway,
but
so
two Halloween costumes.
Really?
Yes.
What do you got going? Yeah. What do you got? Now you'll have a baby with you. So.
Yeah. So Otto will be a monkey and I'm going to be a banana. And then Otto.
This child's in real trouble, ladies and gentlemen.
Otto is also going to be the Toad from Mario, the mushroom. And I'm going to be Princess Peach.
Princess Peach. Okay. Well, yeah. I think that we don't want to hear about any more of this. So let's segue. Let's talk about, hey, Lee, what about changes with Lee Groves?
Yeah.
Over the past 3 years.
Well, look, I mean, we all agree that Amber has experienced the biggest and most important changes in the last 3 years. But as for me, well, Smitty, you already give me the world's longest introduction at the start of every show. But if you want to offer a complete rundown of all the hats I wear, you have to include like show description writer, photo editor, assembler of video clips, chief of social media promotions, because I'm the one who picks out the photos and posts the clips on Twitter.
It used to be me. To be me doing all that stuff.
You notice how it's never me doing that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
He passed it off to
just
me.
As an inside thing for those who know about my show, you are the antithesis of Johnny Hyatt, who was supposed to do all that stuff within this quarter of the TV show. But go ahead. Yeah, it's a blessing.
Well, it keeps me busy, and I learned a lot of stuff.
But what about the physical changes with you? You've dropped a bunch of weight. And see, you dropped so much weight, you just dropped off the damn screen there.
Drop signal.
Yeah. So along with the professional has been a lot of personal changes. Although my Tina stream is not doing so well, but thanks to an exercise program I began almost 2 years ago, I've lost about 20 pounds, and I can tell you, I feel so much better. I feel so much stronger. There's no more pain. I used to have pain in my shoulder and my back and my knees. That's all gone. I keep myself motivated. And another thing that's really changed is that, thanks to your tutelage, Smitty, I've become a much better broadcaster. I still have a long way to go, but definitely learned a lot from you.
Yeah.
And also, I've gotten rid of the headsets, and I no longer breathe like Darth Vader. And you got
Remember
me
that,
in-
Amber? Remember the.
Do you think that's a result of the weight loss?
I think it is. I
And
think
the
it-
stamina, yeah, from doing all the stuff that he puts out a page and a half every morning chronicling his episode on the treadmill. And yeah, and I
Describe your workout, your health routine.
Well, I mean, I started out real small. That was a key to my success. I started with only 500 steps. I did it in about 4 minutes. And then I just kept adding steps. First 25 steps a day. And then when it got to be too big, then 10 steps a day. And my goal was to get to 30 minutes
Of walking. Okay.
And I finally got to 30 minutes at the beginning of this year. And from there, I just got faster and faster and faster. And I reached a real milestone last week. I in 30 minutes, I recorded 5,017 steps, which calculates to about 168 per minute. So I'm drenched at the end of it, but you feel like you've accomplished so much. And through to this point, I have walked almost 1.37 million steps on the treadmill, and I've really felt the benefits from it.
Do you include your steps from when you're mowing your mother's lawn?
No, I don't do that.
You should.
Well,
okay,
no, I have a
before
riding
we
mode.
lose an entire audience in 2 more minutes, all as far as changes for me, we're going to skip mine because there's not too many changes. I'm just most excited that I'm going to see my mommy in LJ, Georgia next week and spend a week in Deliverenceville, and so that maybe I'll come back with some stories there and work on the screenplay a little bit. And but really, I want to when I come back. I want to expand the bandwidth of this show, at least in terms of the guest and the topics. I look forward to some of the people that I've already booked for coming episodes. So we're going to add some other athletes from other sports, past and present, some entertainers and some on the show as well. That'll be a lot of fun because the way I see boxing right now, boxing needs all the help it can get. And we're going to do a lot of that on this show. But I do want to go back, Amber. You're going to be on with us in a couple of weeks when Benavidez takes on Demetrius Andrade. And about a month after that, less than a month after that, actually a couple of weeks, you'll be back on for Haney and Prograis. What are some of the early odds on those two fights?
Nothing too exciting. Benavidez minus 380. So you'd have to bet $380 on him just to win 100. And then Haney is the favorite against Prograis. Same $380 on him just to win 100. So those don't excite me. Prograis a little bit though, because I guess, look, we all know him. We're impressed by him. If you want to put down a little bit of money on him as an underdog, you're going to win a lot. It's plus 275. So if you bet $100 on him, you'd win 275. I think that's a great return. I'm not sure what you think about his chances or what you're willing to reveal, considering you're kind of close to him, Smitty.
Yeah, it's going to be, well, and as I've told him, I think he can win a fight with Haney. I don't think he can win a boxing match. I think he can win a fight, which means he's going to have
to make it a brawl.
Yeah, he's going to have to not necessarily. It can make it a tactical fight, but yeah, he's going to have to use, let's say, some Bernard Hopkins-esque type of stuff in there to make it to win the fight. I think. Yeah, and I think he's capable of doing that. Lee.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that Regis did during his best years was work rate. He was really good with work rate. He was a really good body puncher. He's got to be aggressive, cut off the escape routes of Haney, trap him against the ropes, and just go. Absolutely go.
And when Lomachenko did that against him, he was very effective when he took it to Haney. Devin's not a good inside fighter. He's just not. You
No.
know, so that's
Does
obviously
Bray have that same stamina now?
I think he
that's a great
does.
question. We will find out. He's what
Yeah.
is he 34, 35 now?
34, I think.
He's more motivated. I texted him the other day. He's more motivated than I've ever seen him. And I think that performance or lack thereof in his last fight really has him to the point where I think he's in a good position because not many people are giving him much of a chance to win. So I think he's embracing the underdog title, and we'll just see how it plays itself out. I know there's another fight that you're more interested in.
One last question. Are you saying he has to win by stoppage, though? Because if you're saying that and you think there's a chance, that's plus 550. So $100 would win you 550 for Regis to win by stoppage.
That would be a good, but I don't think he has to win by stoppage. I just think he has to beat him up. And that means that starts early in a fight, and he has to go to town on him right away. And again, to use a line I think I've used a lot on this program, and certainly when I'm calling fights, he has to make Haney feel uncomfortable from the get-go. And we'll see, you know, if he's able to do that. Yeah. But I know there's another fight, though, that you mentioned, and I don't think we're going to see it, even though Usyk, or even though Fury says we're going to see it. And that's Fury and Usyk before the end of this year. I think it'll happen, but I don't think it happens until 2024. What are there odds on that already, on that fight?
Yeah, and I'm just glad you're saying it's going to happen. I didn't think it was going to happen, and this was kind of a dream fight for me because I've loved seeing what Usyk is able to do against the bigger heavyweights, you know?
Yeah.
He's so impressive. But those odds, Usyk an underdog at plus 185, Fury minus 245. You'd have to bet $245 on him just to win 100, which, hey, I think it's worth taking a shot on Usyk. But as we were talking off camera, Smitty, you think Fury's just going to be huge and lay all over him. But
that's what I think he'll yeah, that's what I think he'll do. But Lee, you got an interesting, we don't go too deep into this, but the Wallin fight, you know, you think that might be a blueprint for what Usyk can do. I think you and I were sitting ringside together at that fight where Wallin gave him fits, right? And you see some similarities, right, Lee?
I do see some similarities. Wallin is a southpaw like Usyk. He has a really good jab like Usyk, and he busted him up. And he had him in real trouble as far as winning and losing. Fury had to dig deep in order to pull that fight out. And as skilled as Otto Wallin is, and he is, Usyk is more experienced. He's been a champion in 2 weight classes. He knows how to work the angles. He's in the same camp as Vasily Lomachenko. He practices similar principles. I think that if he fights the correct fight, and if Fury is not quite on his game, especially if it's in December and he's coming off the Ngannou thing, maybe the Ngannou thing takes a little more out of him than you might think. Maybe there's a shot. He's got a chance, right?
The Ngannou thing. The fact that we're even talking about an Ngannou thing.
Because it's timely. Look, it's this weekend.
Oh, God, how pathetic is that
Right.
that we're even talking about that crap.
But is it indicative of the state of boxing, right?
Well, you know,
Can I make one more point, though? That Wallin fight, wasn't that before Fury then decided to bulk up and just go with
yes,
I think so.
your
Yeah.
size?
I think
he
I
cracked
think
the
it
code,
was.
and that's what he's going to stick with.
I have never interviewed Tyson Fury, and I have no desire to ever interview Tyson Fury. I think he will always go down no matter what, even if he's done right now after the Ngannou thing. I think that because of his prodigious size and because he has really good boxing skills, he would be a difficult matchup for any fighter in history. Do I think he would beat Ali? No. Do I think he'd beat Larry Holmes? No. Lennox Lewis? No. I think all of those guys would soundly defeat him. But he'd give anybody and everybody trouble because he's just a freak. His size is freakish, and his skills are pretty damn good for a guy that size. And which leads me I don't want to get into the whole state of boxing thing. We've done that for 3 years, and every damn thing that I've said has come to fruition. Celebrity boxing, YouTube crap, guys' names that I won't even say and I'll never put on this show. They've pretty much almost destroyed things for the real boxing fans. It's the worst it's ever been that I've ever seen.
Minus for Amanda Serrano.
Yeah. Well, in the women's game, sure, and overseas boxing is thriving. It's mostly here. HBO's been gone. We're now losing Showtime. But I think one of the things, just to end on a positive note, and something very interesting that'll be, I think, that will be coming up in 2024 is something that seemed so improbable. If you go back, I don't know what show it was, but I guess it's been over a year, maybe 2 years, and we did an entire episode devoted to comparing Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Bud Crawford. What did I do, Lee? I came up with
well, here's
17 categories.
It wasn't an entire show. It was a segment.
Okay.
But I think it went like 15, 16, 17 minutes or something like that. And we went through 17 different categories. This was when Crawford and Canelo were 1 and 2 in the pound for pound race. We were trying to figure out who was the better fighter pound for pound. Canelo was at his peak. He was just undisputed champion. Terrence Crawford was doing his thing, still undefeated. And so we went through 17 different categories. And of course, you was the one who established the categories. And I think that you kind of tilted the scale toward Crawford because 6 or 7 of them were based on the fact that Crawford is a switch hitter and Canelo is not. And therefore, by default, he wins 7 categories right off the bat. But it was a really good debate. You presented your arguments very well. Amber and we were on Canelo's side, and we presented our arguments, I thought, very well. And, well, it looked like that because Crawford had his categories, Crawford came out ahead 10 categories to 7.
Right. Well, we're now
so ironic that you gave him props for switching stances when you hate that guys do that.
Yeah, and I'm so against it. And there's so few guys, even in the history of the sport, that have been able to do it as successfully as he has. There's guys, throwbacks, from the past that were able to get away with it seamlessly.
Yeah.
And he's one of the best that these eyes have ever seen do it. And believe me, when you're as skilled as him and with both hands and you can do it, I mean, we always talk about how difficult it is facing a southpaw, but when you got a guy like him who can do it both ways, it creates hell. We can ask Errol Spence about that and everybody else he's fought. But the interesting thing is, I truly believe that, and I think you agree with me, Lee, that there's a great possibility we'll see that fight.
I think in light of how Crawford performed against Spence, and it was an overwhelming performance, and the perceived erosion of Canelo, he did look good in his last fight, but he is not the same guy that he was a couple of years ago. Instead of a fight
couple of years ago is when we did that comparison.
Yeah, now it's getting closer and closer.
Right.
And look at how Crawford is perceived now. He is perceived as an all-time great.
And he's gotten bigger. By the way, Crawford's gotten bigger, and he's grown into, he certainly now is a 154-pound fighter with no problem and can fight at, I wouldn't recommend him go in there as a $160, but basically what'll be the difference is 25 pounds. They're the same height. The 4 inches in reach is, as I think, key that Bud has, but Canelo can also punch with both hands, and I think he'd have an excellent shot. That's what makes it so damn interesting and compelling. And when you're as great as those two are, why not take a chance? It's not like it's boxing, you can get hurt, but it would just be a wonderful fight, and I think we'll see it. And if we see it, I would lean towards Crawford to win the fight. I think he would do to Canelo basically what Floyd did to him all those years ago, from both angles.
And what other real choices do they have to make a bunch of money? either guy.
Well, do we want it? Do we think Canelo's going to go back in there against Bivol? I
No.
don't. I don't think he wants any damn part of that. The
And
fight
will
that
that draw the
everybody,
pay-per-view
the fight that
numbers?
everybody would want to see would be Benavidez. That is a fight that should have already been made.
But
Is-
would that even draw the pay-per-view numbers?
No,
Not like Crawford.
not like Crawford. And that's with given everything that's going on in boxing. And truly, I agree with Jim Lampley. Nothing can kill boxing and nothing can really save it. But it's in a heap of trouble right now, at least in this country. I think that would be a fight that everybody would gravitate to, because Canelo is still, Crawford's the best fighter. I think we'll all agree with that now. I hope. But Canelo's still the face of boxing, in my opinion.
He is. He really is. He has the biggest fan base. He draws the biggest contracts. He makes the most money. He's very savvy.
I walk into the local gas station and there's a cardboard cutout of him in the beer aisle, and he's wearing not boxing gear, but like a golf outfit.
Yeah. And again, I think he has taken on pretty much everybody that he could. So that would be the fight. When you have two phenomenal athletes like that, and there's 20 pounds of separation, it's a lot. It's why Canelo would be and should be the favorite, but Crawford is a little more skilled, better footwork, better hand speed, better hands, and that's what makes it so damn interesting. I don't get excited about many fights these days, but that one would really excite me because of the danger that Crawford would be taking by going into a fight like that. And for Canelo, if he loses, it's going to make him look pretty damn bad that he gets beat by a smallish dude like that. So let's just hope that we get a chance to see it. And certainly the Benavidez fight, we're going to be talking about David. We'll get him back on the program in the next few weeks as he readies for that fight with Andre, which I look forward to as well. Any final things to say, Amber, before we get you out of here?
Well, if Showtime Boxing no longer exists, then where are we ever going to become superstar broadcast announcers?
I've already been there and done that. For you two, I don't know what you guys are. I've already, as far as I'm concerned, when you've been in the ring with Roberto Duran and Aaron Pryor and Bernard Hopkins and Floyd Mayweather, and I can go on and on.
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about me and Lee. Well,
well, you guys work that out, and perhaps here's my final thing, because we're going to talk about this, but Showtime was like family to me. They sponsored me for 30 years. And HBO and Showtime were networks that were boxing. The streaming services, and including ESPN, they cover boxing. They carry the fights, but they're not boxing. HBO and Showtime were invested in the sport. And so losing both of those cannot be a good sign. For those who say, well, streaming services and we'll see what the future holds. One thing, though, that I think that, to speak of Showtime, that they did with that Super 6 tournament, if these other streaming services and if boxing and the different sanctioning bodies can get together and start having tournaments where we end up with maybe one world champion every 3 years and everybody participates, all the sanctioning bodies, and get the fans involved, I think that would draw interest, back into the sport. But that's a hefty order to get people in boxing to cooperate. Lee?
That's the key thing, cooperation and the will to do it. I think that if there's a collective will, if the powers that be recognize the problems that currently exist, and if they're in a place where they say, hey, we got to do something dramatic, we got to move the needle here, only when enough people in power realize that and they make the decision to change, that's when real change will start to happen. I think Lou DiBella said that during our show with him. He recognizes the problems and he also recognizes the solutions.
Yeah.
And only then there has to be a sea change. There has to be a seismic shift. And boxing is in need of one. It has been in need of one for a long time. But maybe fights like Canelo and Crawford every few months would be able to move the needle in a sufficient way. This is a divided universe. There are a whole bunch of different ways to entertain, and boxing's got to find a way to do that. And I do think that the shift to streaming services is just a natural progression. We have a generation coming up that has pretty much entirely their information on their phones, on their computers. They're moving away from terrestrial television. And boxing is making the move, just like a lot of other things are making the move to streaming. All we need to do is have internet, which, as you saw with my technical difficulties in West Virginia, we're still working on that. But I'm an optimist. Boxing has been the most resilient of sports. I believe that resiliency is still there. It just needs to have the proper push and the proper people deciding that a move needs to be made.
Well, and I'll do it again. I like working by myself. I've had the ability to do that recently, but I loved working with you, Amber. We got a chance to work together for several years, and hopefully, that could happen again. I'm very picky and choosy. There's a lot of people I simply would not want to work with. There's a lot of networks I simply would not want to work with. But yeah, we and you were doing a great job. I'm sure you will get that opportunity again, whether you'll be next to somebody as brilliant as me. I doubt that, but if that happens, then that'll be great, because I know you really enjoyed calling the fights too.
Yeah, but I'm not sure it would be that much fun without you.
Yeah, well, we'll see if we can rekindle that. But we got to get out of here. And now this show went way overboard, but it was show number 100, so I guess that is okay. Hey, I want to shout out to our editor extraordinaire, Jack Quinn. He's been doing a great job, right, Lee?
Yeah, he has. Jack came on, I think sometime in season 3, maybe the end of season 2. He's a young fella, and he has done a really good job. It's a challenging job, a lot of jigsaw pieces to put together, but he's done a really terrific job.
Okay,
you're really
too much.
Guy.
Don't let it go to his head. He's got a great head of hair too, almost as good as mine.
Yeah,
as good as mine. Also want to thank Mike Weber, the co-founder and COO of Fight. Mike's been great to us. We got the time slot finally that we want, Friday evenings at what are we on? 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 o'clock here in Las Vegas. Amber, thank you. Lee, thank you. Now, we started this show 100 with a silent shot of show number 1, which I think was October the 14th, 2020. But that's not the way we're going to get out of here. I think what we'll do is have my dear friend Diamond Dallas Page get us out of here with, well, so long, everybody. Take it away, DDP.
1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Man.